Welcome back to the Electrify podcast, brought to you by the creators of Electrify Expo, North America's largest EV festival, coming to a major city near you. All right, joining us here is a special guest. We already wrapped out about a few things before we hit record here, but Laurance Yap, and Yap is the senior manager of sustainability at Lithia Driveway, which is the largest auto retailer in the nation, and has been ramping up its educational online marketplace called GreenCars. And what I loved about what Laurance said is he came into this as kind of a skeptic of EVs. So alongside his skepticism, you've probably enjoyed this journey, not only you
Absolutely.
learning about this, but also educating people and also the progression of cars. So Laurance, thanks for joining us here. And if you're watching the video, that is not an EV behind him. That's a Porsche because
Yeah, exactly.
but I mean, hey, they make EVs now. Right?
Porsche makes a fantastic EV, actually. One of the first ones I ever drove. So
perfect. And Lithia Driveway, I mean, just an absolute powerhouse. But you're an auto enthusiast. I mean, you're a member of a race team. And so first off, I mean, anybody listening to this, obviously wants to know more about EVs.
Yeah.
GreenCars. What is that? And what are you doing? What's your movement?
Well, so, GreenCars is actually the brainchild of our CEO, Brian DeBoer, who is personally very passionate about sustainability and about this transition to a cleaner future. He's got an incredible house that's, run all on renewable energy. He's an EV owner and driver himself. And I think, as the CEO of a dealership group that has hundreds and hundreds of car dealers, one thing he realized is that there's so much that's happening at a car dealership just to kind of keep the business going and to move cars from the lot and to get them through service, that there was a gap in terms of educating people to the point where they might be interested in buying, never mind an electric vehicle, but a plug-in hybrid, a conventional hybrid, or even a more fuel efficient vehicle than they have now. And the place to educate people on that stuff, especially on an EV where the ownership experience can be quite different from a gasoline car. The point of where you're educating people can't be when somebody walks into the dealership and says, "Hey, I need a new car." Well, let me tell you about charging. Let me tell you about range. Let me tell you about the different kinds of battery technology and all of these apps. It's a bit of a longer runway. And so GreenCars was really his brainchild in terms of, we want to develop a brand agnostic site that really is focused on educating people so that they want these cars. They're interested in these cars. And so the vision of it, which Brian, together with my colleague Kevin Jennings, over the last 3-4 years kind of developed, was GreenCars is a way to sort of educate people to grow the pie of electrified vehicle, intenders. And we, as the biggest retailer in the country, will just, if the pie grows, we win, right? So, we're really focused on delivering. It's the way we've set up the site is kind of, in some ways, like a bit of a curriculum. We have a 101 section.
I'm looking at the site now, and
yeah,
and if it's your and I loved what you said there, is like, it's a long runway. If it's your first EV, and let's be quite honest, and I'm not saying your dealerships itself, but I'm saying in general, sometimes the salespeople aren't educated themselves because it is new, or there is something new and emerging.
Mm-hmm.
So when you go into that dealer and you engage with somebody that maybe doesn't know a lot about it, maybe there's somebody like you that is wildly educated on EVs and makes it more, because let's just call it what it is. The car dealership industry over the years has evolved. I mean, even from Saturn being like, it's no haggle pricing, right? They changed the game, and that changed the perception. And look at how Tesla and that buying experience, right? So there's just so many different facets. And to make it less intimidating, one, buying the car is scary enough. Two, do you feel right in getting the value? Three, are you getting the right car? Because at the end of the day, an EV might not be the solution for you. It might be something else. But this GreenCars just the website in general, very user-friendly. I'm looking at it's talking about used EV cars. So it's not just like buy the newest, buy the latest, buy what fits your life.
Yeah, exactly. And the way we've structured the content is kind of we have a 101 section where it's like, if you know nothing about how a battery works, you can learn that. And then as you sort of progress through, it's like, okay, well, now I know enough about the technology and I'm ready to shop. What are the different kinds of vehicles available to me? Then when it's like, okay, when I'm ready to buy, some of the most important things about, electrified vehicles are, what incentives are available to me? And that can
Mhm.
be completely variable based on what state you live in, what your household income is. So we developed a tool that will help you look up what incentives are available to you. So it's like, okay, well, I live in, um, Southern Oregon, and I'm looking at a Jeep 4xe plug-in hybrid, and I make $60,000 a year, and it actually gives you a list of links to like click here to apply for this incentive, click here to apply for this incentive, etc. And one thing you mentioned as well, that is a crucial part of our mission as part of a dealership organization, is internal education.
Mm.
So all of the tools that exist on the website, we'd like to think are tools that our salespeople, our service advisors can use with their customers to say, like, okay, let's walk through this. If this is the vehicle that you're interested in, let's look at what incentives are available to you. Um, we have held live training events with a number of our dealerships because, quite frankly, I can speak from personal experience. That firsthand driving or riding experience with an EV, especially for somebody who came to this as a bit of a skeptic, is transformative. So earlier this year, we took our sort of internal show on the road, and we own 30 dealerships in the Detroit area. And we put on a day-long training event where all of them brought out EVs from all of their brands. Everybody got to test drive everything. There were a bunch of people there, even though they were supposed to be selling these things, that had never experienced some of these cars. And the most enlightening thing that we heard was, people walked away and they went, wow, like, I didn't realize that that would be that cool.
Mm.
And that was kind of my experience. My personal car still has a manual transmission, but I just like all cars, right? And the
Mhm.
more that you expose yourself to this stuff, I mean, it's different technology, it's a different driving experience, it's a different ownership experience for sure, but it's just as cool in just kind of a different way.
Yeah, I'm just navigating this website while you're talking here, and just looking
Hmm.
at Lithia Motors, seeing,
Hmm.
here's the marketplace, pending,
Yeah,
you could do your location, so you could
yeah,
you could at the comfort of your own home really educate yourself, and even down to, like, home charger installation,
that's right.
like you said, the incentives, public charging stations. It's getting better. The
Yeah,
infrastructure is always something that gets scrutinized. Using the app, going there, how long does it take? Our whole experience is wildly evolving every,
yeah.
let's say, week, right? I mean, would you
Well,
agree with that?
100%, and that's why, I mean, we publish new editorial every day. But one of the key things that we found, well, when Kevin and Brian did the original research to build the site, charging, information about charging was, aside from range, right at the top of people's, sort of objections, right?
Hmm.
And we continue to see that in our web stats, right? People are looking to learn more and more about charging. So we figured, okay, let's make it easy. If somebody wants to buy a charger, they can buy a charger online. If somebody wants to book a home installation, if they've decided they want to buy an EV, and maybe, we'd like to think most of our dealers would be able to help you with that. But if not, you can book a home installation. Um, and those are tools, along with tools that help you kind of develop an understanding of what the cost of ownership will be, that we think will help you sort of make it over the line. We know that even now, as the gap between the price of let's say, a new electric vehicle and a new gasoline vehicle, that continues to narrow. It's
Hmm.
gotten tighter and tighter every year, and in some cases, used electric cars are now cheaper than some used gasoline vehicles. Well, having a clear picture of like what you are going to spend is going to be really, really valuable.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump around here, but I'm looking at the
Sure.
website, and I mean, BMW i4, and you guys, again, expert insights, everything
Hmm.
about EV cars and a play
Yeah.
off the EV, right?
Yeah.
Cadillac Optic, the 911. I mean, this is a bold statement. The electric Mercedes G-Wagon is the best G-Wagon. It's a bold statement.
It's got four motors. You can manipulate each
I know.
individual wheel like completely independently. You're not reliant on, locking differentials or anything. You could say, I want this wheel to spin at 50 miles an hour, and I want this wheel to spin at 20 miles an hour. And you can do all kinds of crazy stuff off road with that vehicle that you can't do in a G Wagon powered
Right.
by gas, which is already about as capable an off road vehicle as you can get.
Which was the car that you're kind of, I mean, again, you could like you said, Porsche probably makes one of the best that you're
Yeah.
excited about, because I mean, Porsche's, just built a brand about that driving experience. I mean, not
Yeah.
taking anything away from BMW, obviously, but
Yeah.
the driving experience and their motto. But which was a vehicle, I guess, three different classes, right? Super big
Yeah.
performance,
Yeah.
comfort, value, right? It's kind of like choose three: good, fast, and cheap. You can only choose two. You can only choose two, right? You can only choose
Yeah.
good, fast, or cheap.
Well, I would say, I live in downtown Toronto, so my daily commuting needs are not significant. So
Mm.
an EV, even with a small range, I with a home charger, I would do just fine. I live in a condominium building where, our condo board's now actually supporting the installation of chargers in our parking spaces. So I would say, one of my favorite electric cars, even though it doesn't have great range, the next generation car, which is coming really soon, does, is the Mini. It's a blast to sort of just, it's more fun to drive in the city than a gasoline one. It's super responsive, handles like a go kart. And, I found over 2 weeks living with one over the Christmas holidays, like, I never really worried that much about range. And the more that you drive these things, the more that you start to become comfortable with, okay, if I've got a place to plug in, if I'm not going on a big old road trip like for 5 or 6 hours, the range doesn't
Mhm.
really matter. Um, you talked about Porsche. I worked at Porsche corporate for 6 years in marketing and product planning and stuff. So I'm really bought into kind of the steering feel and all of this sort of mechanical character that the cars had. And I came to the Taycan, about as skeptical as I could possibly be, because you look at this thing and it's like it weighs almost 5,000 pounds. It doesn't have, well, it actually does have a two-speed transmission, but I can't change gears on it. And what just floored me about the Taycan was, in the first 100 feet, I hadn't even gone around a corner. I just pulled out of a parking lot. You just sort of went, oh, this is a Porsche. It's going to be great. The seating position, the steering feel, the way that the brake pedal responded, all of those things were there. And the more you drove it, the more you were like, oh, like, all of these rumors that I've been reading about, okay, well, electrification coming to the 911, which has happened.
Mhm.
And then the next generation car, the 718, going full electric. I'm really excited about this
Mhm.
now. The third one I would say is the Ford F-150 Lightning, um, because it's not a perfect product. If you tow a trailer frequently, it's not going to be a great fit for you. But for the way a lot of people use their pickup trucks as kind of a combination between a work vehicle and a personal use vehicle, I think it's brilliant. The fact that they've kind of repurposed that massive engine compartment into a giant trunk that's got plugs in it. It drives great. It's super versatile. And I would say I give Ford so much credit for not dipping their toe into electric, but going right towards their best selling product and actually the best selling vehicle in North America, and saying, we're going to electrify that. We're not going to go and do some little niche thing. We're going to
Mm.
put it in the F-150. And so it sort of makes me really excited about like what their next generation EV pickup's going to be like.
And that's just such a smart approach. Is it's a little more digestible for somebody
Yeah.
that's just, I mean, Ford, best selling truck in class, right? And
Yeah.
and what they've done, and Ford is just always part of the, like, it's, kind of starts on Tesla, Ford, then
Hmm.
Hyundai, obviously, I think Rivian,
Yeah. The
because
Hyundai
again,
stuff is amazing.
It's unreal. And then,
Yeah,
Rivian, I was talking to my buddy the other day, and he has a Ford Raptor. They
yeah,
have a Tesla Model 3. They're probably going to go for the Model 3 Performance. So they're going to change
yeah,
that. His wife just got rear-ended. So he's like, we'll probably go for the Performance. And then
yeah.
he brings up the R3X Rivian. Bro,
That looks
how
amazing.
cool is that, dude?
Yeah,
Right? Like,
exactly.
how cool is the
Yeah,
R3X? Like, it's a hot
yeah,
hatchback rally cross. It just
yeah.
looks like an old
Looks like an old
Golf, like
Lancia
Rabbit
Delta,
GTI.
Yeah,
Yeah, Lancia Delta. It's a
yeah,
little Lancia
yeah,
Delta style. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
but how cool is that? Have you seen one of those in person, or have you driven
Yeah,
those?
Rivian just started selling cars in Canada about 2 months ago. So I'm starting to see a lot of them on the road. But I think what's really significant about Rivian um, is the trajectory of their technology. And this morning, news came out, I think, on Reuters that they've signed a $5 billion deal with Volkswagen Group, where VW Group is going to get access to their software platform, which I think is really sort of class leading.
Mhm.
Their work in kind of the software based vehicle, I think, is outstanding. And the gent leading Rivian in North America right now is actually a former German boss of mine from Porsche, Kiel
That's cool.
Gruner. So I think there's been kind of a natural synergy between those two companies, and it's exciting to see how much activity, both in software and hardware, is happening in North America, and
Yeah.
that kind of balance of power kind of shifting back towards the North American industry in terms of innovation in EVs.
What's the FAQs that you get frequently asked questions about, again, somebody, you looking in the mirror as you were a skeptic, and now here you
Yeah,
are being ravenous about, you
yeah.
know, about this industry and this scene.
Well, I think the hot topics now are the hot topics that they were 5 years ago.
Mhm.
None of that's really changed. Range anxiety slash charging anxiety. Um, the cost of the vehicles continues to be higher. So, um, you know, uh, get helping people overcome kind of the knowledge gap on these things is a big focus of ours, right? So explaining to people like, yeah, you might think you need like 500 miles of range, but the longest daily commute in the US on average is about 51 miles. So if you're able to set up a charger at home, which is going to be far and away the cheapest way to charge, um, that's not something to worry about. And again, same thing about charging anxiety. It's like, okay, yeah, if you're going to, drive 600 miles in a day and go cross country, you might need to plan ahead, but you probably
Mhm.
will have to stop for a bathroom break or a meal anyway. But for me, the most important educational piece, and something that we, continue to work on, and we're working on a couple of digital tools to help people with this, is to help people understand the total cost of ownership, right? It's not just, okay, we all just look at the monthly payment for the vehicle. And you might walk into a dealership and the let's say the Hyundai Tucson is $400 a month and an Ionic 5 is $600 a month, and you immediately go, oh my God, like I can't afford that. It's like, well, I, as a salesperson, maybe the first question I need to ask is like, okay, well, how much do you spend on gas every month? And then, I do the math on my relatively fuel efficient gasoline car, and I spend like $500 a month on gasoline. And I start to, it's like, okay, if I price out what electricity is, and I'm aware of the fact that if I charge between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m., that, electricity is a fifth of what I would
Mhm.
spend at peak times. It's like, well, now my $500 a month goes to like $40 a month to drive the
Mhm.
same distance. And so helping people kind of understand that comparison and not just look at the cost of the vehicle, but how much does it cost to refuel or recharge? And then you look at maintenance costs, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, you might spend a little bit more on tires over the course of your ownership because these cars are a little heavier,
Mhm.
they produce a lot more power, but there is no oil to change,
Right.
right? There are no filters. You're not going to have to do, rebuild mechanical components. Your
But
brakes are
Laurance,
going to
what about the
last a little
blink the
longer.
blinker fluid? The
The
blinker
blinker
fluid
fluid,
always
yeah,
goes out.
exactly. Yeah,
Oh
so you're still
man.
gonna have to put blinker fluid in, right? You're still gonna have to change
Your
wiper blades.
exhaust bearing. Your exhaust bearing goes out. Oh.
They
You
are
don't have
still
an
cars,
exhaust.
right? Yeah, you don't have an exhaust, right? So, on average, we were looking at some data from our dealerships. It's like your maintenance cost, even if you're still coming back to the dealership for maintenance, right? And you're paying for wiper blades and for washer fluid and
Yeah.
you are still going to have coolant, right? Because the battery has a cooling system.
Yep.
Um, your maintenance costs are going to be a third of what you would
Yeah.
spend over the course of a lifetime with a gas car. So that total cost of ownership piece is so important. Um, and so as a shopper, wrapping your head around the math is really important. But the other major thing I would say is firsthand experience is really important. And it's not, obviously the test drive or the 20-minute test drive or something is going to give you a really good sense of how fast these vehicles are, how smooth they are, that they handle well, all that. But if your dealership, and most dealerships I think are these days, because the industry is experiencing a slowdown, if you're able to borrow one like over a weekend so that you can experience, okay, like what's it going to be like when I run this battery down and have to
Mhm.
find charging. Once people do that the first time, once they use the navigation system in the car to, it's like, oh, there's a charger nearby, and it organizes them by charging speed, and it'll even tell you this one's free and this one's not, or if they have to download an app or whatever. Once they have experienced that initial anxiety of like, oh, what am I going to do about this? Then they go and plug in, and it's no big deal. It's transformative, and we've seen that
Yeah.
with our staff as well as with customers.
Looking at like just the market right now.
Yeah,
2022 Ford Mustang Mach-E GT 41,000.
yeah.
Like that's not bad. I'm, just
That is
rounding off numbers.
below the average transaction price of a new vehicle in the U.S.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And then and again, like if you've got a home charger and you program it to charge overnight, your operating costs for fueling that thing might be $40-50 a month on average. Like that's
Yeah.
crazy, right?
Yeah, those long-term experience, and that's why we're talking right now is Electrify
Mhm.
Expo, really
Yeah,
putting it in people's hands and experiencing either riding shotgun and understand the performance, but micromobility and just that
yeah.
lifestyle. That's what I always talk about, just that solution and looking at all that. What was a cool aha moment that you were firsthand like saw from somebody? Those they're behind the wheel, and obviously I think the biggest one is just the response, the reaction time, because again you're a
Exactly.
sports car guy, but
Yeah.
what else or anything else?
Yeah, you know what? One of the best or the most interesting reactions I had was actually from a member of our staff, where we did one of these, in-person training events where they got to drive some cars up here, and um, it's funny. The service advisor and I, we get along really well, and we get into some pretty heated debates about cars sometimes. And he was again like kind of like me, a pretty anti EV person until he drove one, and then it was like flipping a switch. He came out and he was like, "Oh, like I had no idea." And it's like, yeah, like you could see yourself living with this, right? And that's kind of the emotional part of it. And then once you start to layer in all of the logical stuff, um, I won't go out there claiming that EVs are for everybody, right? And that's also the message of GreenCars. We have lots of people that come to the website, and they might spend some time researching and like, maybe this isn't for me yet, right? If your driving habits are unpredictable, if you're a traveling salesperson and you're regularly doing long hauls, it's, even though it's doable, it's probably not going to be the most convenient. Well, there are other options,
Yeah.
right? And our advantage as a group that sells all of these brands is like, we don't have to sell you the EV. If we decide it's not right for you,
Mhm.
we can sell you this other car, but you are at least well informed about what your options are.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Plug-in hybrid. That's obviously
Yeah.
another option, and
Yeah.
just again that solution. What's the future of green driving for you? Like where EVs fit into the bigger picture of sustainable transportation, and what LED is doing to help as well. Because again, it is a resource for not just you guys, but all these things are equating because it's scary and it's new and yeah. But what else? The future of green driving.
Well, I think the thing to remember is we are still very much in the infancy of all of the technology that we are being exposed to right now. We are used to in 2024 gasoline engines being reliable and powerful and very efficient. But it took 120 years to get there, right?
Mhm.
And I can remember when I started driving in the 90s. By then fuel injection was common and those cars are pretty efficient and pretty reliable. But it wasn't that long before that where you would see cars broken down by the side of the road regularly.
Mhm.
Um, and so, we're in the infancy certainly of battery technology. And so, I think the next 10, 20 years are going to be really exciting to see kind of the leaps and bounds. I mean, we saw it with cell phones, right? We saw it with laptops. And, um, you know, the fact that we already have batteries that can charge from 10 to 80% in 15 minutes, the fact that that battery can probably take you 300, maybe 400 miles, well, you know, like what does the next 20 years look like? I think what's going to be interesting as well in green driving, and one thing even though I'm not personally all that emotionally connected to it, but intellectually, I think what's going to be very interesting is to see what happens in the commercial vehicle market, right? Because
Yep.
we're talking about personal use vehicles right now, the cars maybe that our families move around in, or I drive for fun or whatever. But, you know, the next 20 or 30 years in the commercial business is going to be really interesting. GM is building bright drop EV delivery vans for FedEx and other companies here in Canada. I'm starting to see a lot of those out. Um,
Mm.
Commercial vehicles like delivery vans are perfect fit for electric, right? Because they have their set route and they come back to the depot at the end of the day, and then you plug them in, and then they're good to go the next day.
Mhm.
Long haul trucking, I think, is going to be very interesting to follow. I think that is one area of the market where hydrogen is going to have a huge impact. You know, a, you just can't put a battery big enough into an 18 wheeler for it to really make sense for a long haul truck. So you're starting across the U.S. now to see major investments being made in hydrogen hubs. So I think you'll see hydrogen fuel cell long haul trucks, really start to come online in the next little while. And I just think the commercial vehicle space is going to be one to watch because, again, all of the logical arguments for going electrified for personal use vehicles, well, those are magnified for business, right?
Mhm.
Um, Businesses will buy vehicles on dollars and cents, whereas like for my personal use car, it's like, well, maybe I'm willing to overlook a little bit of a gap in terms of efficiency if I'm going to have something more fun or more stylish or whatever. But all of the arguments around cost of ownership, cost of maintenance, uh, uptime, uh, charging costs, all of that, I think, are going to transform the commercial vehicle business.
All right. And there's a trickle up. I think there's a trickle up effect, right? Like I
Hmm.
did a podcast with Dakota. He's a 4-time electric scooter champion, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, scooter electric? Why does it
Hmm.
charging batteries? You start here in the petri dish, and then it just grows and grows and grows.
Yeah.
So I also think that motorsports has a lot to do with it. So
Oh,
again,
yeah.
scale down, right? So I announced Nitro Cross. I've seen I've seen electric drift cars. I announced the Formula Drift
Absolutely.
Championship. So seeing all these things, and it just goes into, as you say, I mean, the big commercial vehicles and truck. My brother, he
Well,
leases trucks here in Southern California,
yeah.
and he's been out to the EV truck, I don't know what trade show, I guess it would be called.
Mhm.
Seeing that, it's just really cool. So the segue for me is motorsports. You're a motorsports guy.
Absolutely.
What's your take, man? I mean, there's no replacement Ford replacement, brother.
Oh,
We need that Porsche. We need that GT3. But my buddy Ron Carr, just went up and drove the Ionic N
up
electric
Pikes
and
Peak.
up Pikes Peak, and he got the production. He got the production
The,
class, and
the
yeah,
fastest car, the fastest vehicle up Pikes Peak this
Romain
year
Dumas.
was Romain Dumas, who actually I know back in the day where we were testing Cayenne Trans Siberia rally trucks in his dad's backyard in France, 15 years ago. Well, he was fastest up the mountain this year in an F 150 Lightning super truck.
Mm-hmm.
And the two lightly modified Ioniq 5Ns set records for the fastest production vehicles going up the hill. Rivian set a record for the fastest pickup truck, production-based pickup truck going up the hill this year. So, I mean, clearly there is a space for it. Even the series that we race in, the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship, the top class of our series now, they're all hybrid, right?
Mhm.
Bosch is supplying a hybrid power module that augments the gasoline power in these cars. And it's wild because when you're in the pits, and you see these, multi-million dollar prototype cars take off. They're silent until they hit about 60 miles an hour, and then the gasoline engine kicks on. And the electric motors provide instant torque, so the acceleration up to about that speed is crazy. It reduces wear and tear on things like the clutches. And they've gotten the batteries and all of the drivetrain components down to a point where that's not much of a weight penalty. So I'm really, really excited to see, how electrification kind of makes its way across motorsport. I think one of the most exciting series right now is Extreme E.
Mhm.
It's kind of an off-road sort of racing
Dakar.
championship.
It's like
It's
a
kind of
Dakar.
Dakar
It's
style.
Dakar rallycross,
Yeah.
international places, and that's similar to what you're doing too. Is with GreenCars, there's a bit of an education there. That's what they're trying to do, and I know they
Yeah.
want to implement. I know they want to implement hydrogen in that series too, and that's kind of the long play, right? I mean, how they're transporting the vehicles, the locations they're going. It's a whole
Yep.
education piece.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry to cut you off, but I've
No, I think
there's a lot of friends race that Extreme E.
Yeah, and I think that their whole approach to going to these unique places, putting on these events in as low impact a way as they can, and then really it being part of their mission to clean up and leave that place better than when they arrived is really, really interesting.
Mhm.
Um, and again, I think you're starting to see some really interesting technologies start to filter into into um, electric road cars. One of the coolest things right now is the Ionic 5N, where it's like it's probably not going to be as quick, but if you want gear shifts, you can have gear shifts, right?
Mhm.
They can program it to give you gear shifts. They've given it a drift mode, so if you want to like chew up your tires even faster, you can turn off the front motor and you can just spin around and stuff. And it's like
Mhm.
it's adding that kind of emotional element to these cars, which was always there to begin with, but really sort of putting an underline under it and saying like, no, this can be really fun.
And that's what's cool about like talking to you is
Yeah.
you're going, and I love this because you went through the whole, again, skepticism. Now here you are, you're on a soapbox, you're talking
Yeah.
about it, but then you
Yeah.
also it's a full cycle of service because you do have, you know Lithia and Driveway
Yeah.
to complete that story. It's not just a resource, but it's a resource created with that intention to say like, hey, we're here for you.
Yeah.
We don't even, maybe not even buy from us, but it's just rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. And again, the mission isn't. Fortunately, we have a scorecard for
Yep.
how we do within the company. We are not being measured primarily on how many cars we sell. We do track, what our, how many people that have bought from us, um, visited our website on the way to a purchase. But again, our mission is to grow the pie, right? And if more people are considering greener vehicles as the biggest retailer of vehicles in the country, we will pick up some of that business. And, um, you know, that's why we cover Tesla. That's why we cover Rivian. That's why we, make it a point to report not just on the vehicles that we sell, but on everything that's happening out
Yeah. Yeah. And and you bring up those manufacturers in particular because
there. Mm.
LAD, Lithia, and Driveway do
Yeah.
not sell those manufacturers. That's just for
Well, we don't
clarification.
sell them new, right? But
Oh yeah, there you go.
in 2023, the best-selling electric vehicle within Lithia and Driveway's 300 plus stores in the US was a used Model 3, right?
Yep.
So we do sell Teslas,
Yeah.
right? We don't sell them
Yeah.
new, but we sell them used, and we sell used Rivians. I mean, I'm sitting up here in Canada. We've sold Rivians through our dealerships up here. So to me, I think actually you asked about the future of electric driving. I think the way the used EV market is going to develop is going to be very interesting, right? Because we're kind of past this stage of early adopters. Um, and there are a number of people now that are moving into their second electric vehicle or their third electric vehicle.
Mhm.
So the size of available used EV inventory is growing, which means prices are coming down. Plus, you have a new, well, it's not that new anymore, but a $4,000 potential uh, federal incentive on used EVs, right? So EV ownership is going to become within reach of so many more people over the next few years because of the supply as well as the incentives available.
Yeah.
And arguably, the people that are looking at a sub $25,000 EV are the ones that not only are going to benefit the most from that federal tax incentive, which does have income restrictions, etc., but they are the ones that also need the lower cost of ownership, the lower cost of fueling the vehicle the most. And so never mind, delivering kind of the environmental benefit of driving around, and in something that's clean. But now as maybe somebody that's low income, if I'm able to get into a $25,000 electric car that also costs me pennies on the dollar to charge, I mean, that is a potentially massive kind of improvement to my lifestyle or that of my family.
This is, you're just hitting all, I mean, you're hitting all the right notes, and it's really cool to see you're a motorsports guy talking about all the things, prior to us hitting
I just
record,
like
just talking about
cars.
stuff. No,
Yeah,
but that's cool. And you got to
yeah,
like them all. Right. And that's what
yeah.
I've loved about, my journey with cars is, I was a Honda guy. I grew up street
Me too.
racing,
Yeah.
in San Diego, and then progressing on and saw drifting. I was like, holy cow, this is the wave of the
Hmm.
future. It's action sports, motorsports. And,
Yeah.
it's really cool. And you talking about IMSA and your guys' activation there, and there's so much overlap, and for you to be, just call it is, ignorant or just that kind of like,
Hmm.
nope, like it's just a little, I don't
One
know.
thing that that I find disappointing sometimes about conversations I have with skeptics is that you know in some parts of the world the technology has become politicized, which
Mm,
I don't which I don't really get. Right? Like
right.
I just want to drive a great car, and I am not like I'm agnostic to what delivers a great driving experience, right? Like I love getting into my old car and hearing the noise and smelling the sound, sorry, hearing the sound
I knew what you meant.
and
You
smelling
can
the
smell
burning oil
sound, Lawrence.
and and
You got bigger opportunities, brother.
yeah, and all of that stuff. But equally, like my dream garage would be sort of a something like an R3X as kind of a daily driver. Something compact, powerful, full
Mhm,
electric as a daily, and I still have something I can smoke around in on the weekends.
mhm.
And to me, that's the perfect two-car garage.
Yep.
And like I said, I like all cars, and for anybody that has kind of an inbuilt prejudice towards this new technology, all I would say is you need to try it.
Yeah.
You really need to try it
Yep.
because if you like muscle cars, you will love an EV because of the
Hmm.
torque and because of the acceleration and the fact that you can spin all four tires, and it's just fantastic.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, to, like I always say, uh Porsche GT3, Defender 110, that's kind of where
Hmm.
I'm at. But then yeah, that new R3X. But I would say
Yeah,
the Defender 110, either old school with an LS in it.
yeah,
And then, but also I would say, I don't know if you've experienced, and I don't know if LAD has an Ineos dealer, but that Grenadier is pretty sweet.
yeah. It is. I think actually the most interesting thing about Ineos is that the follow-up product that they've got coming, the Fusilier, I think they call it,
Hmm.
which has got four electric motors, but it's got a little three-cylinder onboard range extender, right? So I think even they are seeing kind of the writing on the wall a little bit
Hmm.
about, and hey, in some markets in Europe, you're not going to be able to sell a Grenadier with a gasoline engine in a
Right.
few years, right? Um, I would also say, you as somebody maybe that likes GT3s and Defender 110s and stuff, I think, Defender is a really interesting candidate for an EV conversion. One of our
Hmm.
contributors to the Green Car site, Chase Drum, he's actually converting his Defender 90 into an EV. It's kind of a personal project of his because, I would argue, I mean, you want to put an LS in it, but a, a regular Defender, it's not a car that you buy because of the engine, right?
Right.
It's a car
Not at
with a
all.
tremendous amount of character, but the engine is not the draw. So
Hmm.
to me, something that is as characterful as that, where, hey, if you put an electric motor in it and a battery that might add a couple of 100 pounds, that's no big deal. It's still going to be super cool and give you what you want out of a Defender. I probably wouldn't be putting an EV conversion into like a vintage Ferrari,
No.
but there are lots of vintage cars out there that I think are great candidates for EV conversions.
Yeah, I mean, a 65 Lincoln Continental EV
Oh,
conversion would be
perfect. Yeah,
fire, dude, because
yeah,
like,
yeah,
you're cruising down, then you're getting all the sensory overload. Farah and I were
yeah,
talking about that, and just
yeah.
to your point, the engine's not the star there. It's
Exactly.
the experience, it's the car, it's the sheet metal, it's the environment, right? It's kind of like
Hmm.
having a house with a view. You're like, oh, well, the house costs this much, but the view is priceless, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
that's
Yeah,
yeah, that's
yeah.
great perspective. What else are you doing to reach out to the community again across North America? Like,
Well,
I mean, are you activating Electrify Expo? Are you reaching out?
yeah.
Like, what else do you do?
Well, I mean, obviously you guys are connected to Electrify Expo, and I've been involved with Green Cars for now. This is my second year, and one of the key things that we said to each other, at the end of 2023 was, you know, Kevin, his team have done this amazing job building all of this digital stuff, but we need to take what we've done in the digital world and get it out into the real world. Because again, that firsthand experience, whether you're driving a vehicle or whether you're just talking to somebody that knows a little bit about something, is super important. So one of our big focuses for this year was to activate off the website. And for us, Electrify Expo was kind of a no-brainer because it has national coverage, 8 events. We committed to the full tour, and at every one of the Electrify Expo events, not only are we bringing a big like digital touchscreen where you can, you know, use all of the tools we have on the website, where you can browse the buyer's guide, where you can research what incentives you have available, but we're partnering with a local Lithia Driveway store to bring an interesting vehicle out to show off. We've done a 4xe Jeep. Um, Denver is coming up soon. We're going to have a Ferrari 296 GTB in our display at Denver because like 40 something percent of the new Ferraris that are sold now are plug-in hybrids. Not a lot of people know that. So it's a great way to talk about electrification is not just like for granola munching eco weenies, We've got, here's the
All right,
latest
granola
here's
munching eco weenies. I'm definitely getting that
here's the
tattooed on me at some point.
absolutely. Here's the latest Ferrari supercar, right? And we're going to be giving away a chance to come and do a behind the scenes tour at Ferrari of Denver, meet some of the service staff, and then take the car for a drive.
Sick.
So every event that we're doing with Electrify Expo, the idea is to have an interesting EV or plug-in hybrid that isn't part of the manufacturer test drive activation, where we can do something special with it.
So now it's a pasta eating eco meanie, not just a
Yeah,
granola
yeah,
granola
exactly.
eating eco weenie. We've just converted people over to this.
Right?
Then you
We
got
think
to do this.
we
You
thought
got
it
to
would
do
be
yeah. You got to do the
absolutely.
Italian hands, man. Let's talk with your hands.
But we thought it would be
Um,
a little disruptive and a little bit, I think we're going to catch people sort of in their tracks. Like, what is a Ferrari doing here? It's like it's electrified too, right? They've
yeah,
got this. They've got the SF90. I mean, the LaFerrari was almost 10 years ago, and that was a plug-in hybrid. So you
crazy.
know,
Um, won't take up too much of your time, but this has been
Mhm.
really wildly educational and
Yeah.
informative, even for myself. And that's that I enjoy hosting this podcast because I'm just constantly inquisitive on
Mhm.
perspective, markets, what's going on, trends, and
Yeah.
like I said, it's changing every day. And so for somebody that's listening to this, what are your tips for new EV buyers? So they're maybe on the edge.
Mhm.
Their friend has one, but they've never really
Right.
driven it. What's some tips from you?
Well, the first tip really is to make sure that you have the opportunity to drive one, and whether that's going to a local dealer, whether that's going to Electrify Expo and trying a bunch of different cars, that first-hand experience, you need to know that you need to feel it, and if you're ready to go a little further, investigate that kind of extended test drive. I think most dealers would be quite open to it. Um, but if not, there are rental car companies out there that will rent an EV, and you'll be able to determine pretty quickly whether it's the right fit for you or your family. Um, Talk to an owner. Some of the best advocates for EVs, not even advocates, like you'll get really unfiltered, um, advice from them. EV hybrid owners associations. There's one in pretty much every part of the country. We partner with them a lot on local initiatives, and they're wonderful. Finally, I think, well, not finally, thirdly, I think it is so important to take the time to do the math. So many of the um, barriers that people have in their mind around, especially EV ownership, are around this looks too expensive for me. But if you start to dig into charging costs, figure out how much electricity costs, overnight and at peak times. Look at how much you're spending on gas. Look at how much you're spending on maintenance, and then take the time to do that math. I think that's a pretty compelling argument for most users. And then if you do decide to buy an EV and you purchase one, I think it's really good advice to speak to your dealer about doing what we call a second delivery. There is so much tech in these cars that it is probably impossible when you come and pick up that car the first time to go through every single thing. And so the best advice I heard from one of our sales managers was, their salespeople, they give new EV owners enough information to find a charger, charge at home, to learn to operate the basic features of the vehicle, and then it's like start a note on your phone and just start making a list of the questions you have. Come back in a month and we will go through your list of questions and answer all of those things. But you're regardless of how much information we give you now, you're going to come back with questions. So why don't you just start making a list of questions? And that second delivery, I think, will really result in kind of a much better ownership experience.
I mean, we don't. I'm an iPhone guy. I don't know
Me
what
too.
manufacturer. Okay, so we don't even cut into half the capabilities that phone can do. I'll just speak on my own
Same
behalf.
thing with the
Like
cars. Yeah.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife has a BMW X6, and I have a
Mhm.
Toyota Tundra.
Yeah.
And that I don't. I'm like, what? Now it's like you don't even need to touch things. You
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
talk with my hands, and like the song will change because I'm like, the other boop. I'm like, oh
Yeah. Yeah.
shoot. So
Yeah.
it's Cro-Magnon lawyer, man. I always say like it's frightening and bewildering. I don't know
Yeah.
these things. They're scary. But if you ask the right questions, you're going to get the answers that you actually you might not like. But traditionally, you're like, hey, I experienced this. What about this?
Mhm.
You have an opportunity. You have this
Yeah.
sounding board.
And what I think we provide on our site certainly is in that research phase, the ability to look up a lot of that stuff. That's especially going to help you around charging and around
Mhm.
the financial piece, right? Where you're at least going to be able to walk into any potential kind of transaction better informed than you were about, what this is really going to cost you, and where you might be able to charge if you're gonna go on a road trip and that kind of thing. And you'll
Yeah.
even have an estimate for how much it's going to cost to install a charger in your home.
Yep. Yeah. Well, Laurance, it's been a real treat and a pleasure for anybody listening. Obviously, myself, selfishly, but what you're doing with GreenCars is an absolute great resource. It seems very digestible, friendly, communicative. Obviously, education. You're really again contributing not only to just that consumer but also to the planet, which is good. And with again Lithia and Driveway, with what you guys do, it's just a full cycle of service. But I really love what you're doing. Again, just it's everybody,
Mhm.
everyone only. It's just
Yeah, exactly.
it's really involving everybody in this conversation.
Right. Well, it was a pleasure talking to you, Jared. Hopefully we get to meet in person at some point.
Yeah, man, for sure. Anything else you want to add to that? Information where they could find, obviously, Lithia and
Uh,
Driveway or GreenCars or anything else? Any other points that?
Yeah,
that we
we're
failed to talk about?
greencars.com, obviously, and you can bounce off of there to all of our social channels. I mean, we've just started up a podcast a few months ago that we're kind of ramping up. Um, and from our buyer's guide, you can jump off to start look at inventory and other things. But really, I think everything you need, and we talk about this a lot, is on the website. And yeah, just all I would say to people is go out there and actually experience these things. It's not enough to read about them.
It's awesome. Well, Laurance Yap, thank you so much for yapping out with us here. Again, the senior manager of sustainability at the Lithia and Driveway. And again, check out greencars.com. Thank you again so much, Mr. Yap.
Thanks very much, Jarod.
Thanks for listening to the Electrify podcast, brought to you by the creators of Electrify Expo. Be sure to catch full video episodes on YouTube at Electrify TV and follow along on social media for daily clips and more.